we're scrambling on the patient side to understand what it all means, how to plan ahead, whether we're even asking the right questions. I didn't even know to mention that I had mid-cycle pelvic pain or that I had an endometrioma on an ultrasound back in 2014. There's just so much that as patients that we don't even know to communicate with our doctors. And so I think that that's where the system, the process, the communication process breaks down, and really what myStoria was built to solve for that gap. So we really act as the command center for the patient, bringing all their information together, helping them understand what their information means.
Welcome to My Fertility Podcast, Superhumans, the show that brings you expert insights, personal stories, and the latest in fertility care, all in one place.
Whether you're starting your fertility journey, navigating challenges, or just exploring your options, we're here to empower you with knowledge, support, and hope.
Join us as we dive deep into topics that matter most, from IVF and fertility treatments to mental health and wellness.
I'm Dr. Mavis Garcia.
And I'm Dr. Wise. We're two of the fertility specialists at Markham Fertility Centre in Markham, Ontario, Canada. Think of us as your sisters in all things fertility. Let's demystify the world of fertility together.
Hello, superhumans, and welcome to another episode of My Fertility Podcast. Today, we are welcoming Jessica Schalk. She's the founder of myStoria. She speaks to us openly about her 6-year fertility journey and how her experience led her to where she is today. She founded myStoria to give patients the support, knowledge, and tools to take charge of their fertility, transforming their journey into a patient-centered and empowering one. This is a conversation that you really want to listen to. And if you want to know more about myStoria and how it can help you in your journey, check out the show notes.
Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. There are so many great things that we're going to be talking about. Tell us about your story, your fertility story, and how you came to be sitting with us here today.
Absolutely. Good morning. Like many people listening, my journey through fertility was not a straight line. I spent 6 years trying to have a baby. We went to clinics in both Canada and the US, tried a whole bunch of different things, had a pretty terrible miscarriage that caused other issues. And I think we spent well over $100,000 out of pocket. And I just couldn't take it anymore, walked away from fertility treatments for now. I know, Dr. Garcia, you've been pushing me to freeze my eggs, and I still want to get my head wrapped around going back to that. I agree. So I keep my options open. And for that 6 years, just felt like there was this like dark cloud over my head. And I was really focused on whatever I could do to maximize my chances, and almost at the detriment of happiness outside of this journey. So yeah, we walked away without a baby. What stood out to me was just how hard the process was to navigate and understand what was happening. And so that really stuck with me. I was running a business before myStoria and had this moment of like, okay, I've walked away from treatments. What does life look like for me now? What does life beyond kids look like? And I had this identity crisis almost, sat down with a mentor of mine. And I was like, I just want to solve this problem that I feel so strongly about on the patient side of things. And she's like, Jess, go for it. Do what you need to do to sell your business, whatever you want to do there, like lean into this, what your passion is. And I've actually found it really healing. Unintentionally has brought up a lot of the trauma and grief I've realized I've not dealt with before because I talk to so many people. But I honestly wake up every day I just love this. I went through a really long fertility journey and then just decided I'm going to solve some of the challenges that I've experienced.
I remember you sent me a message. We're not doctor patients. We've never met in that context, but you sent me a message on Instagram and you told me, I follow you on Instagram. I know what you're about. This is what I want to do. Can we connect? And I replied immediately and I said, yeah, let's meet, because I could sense from the message that you were like so passionate about this. And I could almost sense there was a layer of pain in there, as you were reaching out to me. I'm honored that you reached out to me and that you asked my opinion. And here we are today. You did make your vision come true from that conversation a few years ago where you brought me a chicken salad and we sat in my office and talked.
That was great. I so appreciate it. My husband was sitting beside me when you responded. I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's responded," because I just love what you guys are about. That we talked for so long too, and I just so appreciated how human and wonderful, it sounds like the wrong word, but I think you know what I mean, and just wonderful you both are, and I'm so appreciative you've been supporting me and my journey through my story along the way.
Tell me, you mentioned that you had your own journey and you said there was this problem that you wanted to solve. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what the problem is? And I think we all know there is a problem in the fertility space, but tell me from your perspective, what is the gap? What is the problem you're trying to solve?
I think the gap was this: in a world where we're making life-changing decisions, really major decisions in a very complex process with so much like art into the journey, I feel like we're doing it with a lot of fragmented information, not a lot of context or understanding. At the end of the day, with the exception of what I know is amazing experience at Markham, with not a lot of support in between appointments or not a lot of support even from our circle. You're just like in this moment of that fragmented decision making, don't understand what you're signing off on or what the treatment process looked like, not sure that your diagnosis is correct or you're going down the process with unexplained infertility. It just feels like care is happening to us and we're not an equal part in that decision making on how that care happens. And I felt very strongly that a more informed patient, someone that can show up feeling like, okay, I understand what's going on. I understand what my options are. I understand what the situation is. It provides a better experience for both sides.
And how does myStoria help with that?
I know that there's more patients that need help than there are clinics available. Like, I know how overwhelmed the system is. You can see it. And I've learned so much in the last year and a half of figuring out and creating myStoria. And so we're scrambling on the patient side to understand what it all means, how to plan ahead, whether we're even asking the right questions. I didn't even know to mention that I had mid-cycle pelvic pain or that I had an endometrioma on an ultrasound back in 2014. There's just so much as patients that we don't even know to communicate with our doctors. And so I think that that's where the system, the process, the communication process breaks down, and really what myStoria was built to solve for that gap. So we really act as the command center for the patient, bringing all their information together, helping them understand what their information means. We have micro education modules that are personalized to their situation that can help them, level up their understanding of what a treatment process means, what a medication means, what a particular diagnosis means in the context of fertility treatments, help them understand the attrition process. The list is kind of never ending for specifics or broad based education. And then we're also working on what I call like push notifications to your phone that are like, hey, Jess, you've got a retrieval today. You've got this. Good luck. And just the support system of help. In addition to that, things like, hey, we've noticed that you've been logging whatever symptoms. You may want to chat with your doctor about endometriosis or an immune issue or something. We're not here to replace the clinics. That's not the issue. It's just to proxy some of the burden of trying to figure out the journey over to us so that they can make the communication with their doctors even better. And so there's tons of different things in there, but that's really how we're solving it. The patient experience gap is giving them some control and clarity over the treatment process, their decision making, their fertility.
Sounds like there are so many facets to myStoria. There are so many ways to tackle this gap because you said it's a gap in care. It's almost like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Right? Gap is putting it very kindly. but it's absolutely true. And I absolutely agree with everything you say. So from the user's experience of myStoria, what is the user experience like, let's say on a regular kind of day-to-day basis? How is this, moving patients forward, helping patients without adding on another layer of complexity or another like thing to remember apart from, the injections, the medications, appointments? How does it all come together to support a patient?
It's a great question. The intent is not to add more noise to the industry. I know Dr. Garcia and I had chatted about that. That does not add value to anyone. Our approach to solving a problem for the patient is almost to act like a connective tissue between, the apps on their phone, the patient app that they have with the clinic, their records from their OB or their family physician, their naturopath, whatever their care team looks like. And so that is really how we're approaching solving the problem without adding more noise. Patients can use it in a number of ways. So the components of the myStoria platform, just to be clear, we are really set out to only enhance the experience in clinic and not to disrupt what's already there, because there's a massive issue. There's over 200 million fertility posts on forums every month, which I think is a wild number of posts. And I know that we're doing that to kind of crowdsource and understand our care from each other, and then come back to our doctor and say, I heard from so and so that uterine PRP was something I want to consider. Can we talk about that? And, that's met with, depending on the clinic, depending on the doctor, some resistance. And so we're not trying to add a layer of complexity in clinic, almost like keep that complexity outside of clinic, support the patient in narrowing in on the things they want to say, prepping for their appointments with their doctor, decoding some of the things that they've had a conversation with their doctor they don't understand. We're also trying to help them coordinate across their care team. So the typical patient experience on a daily basis, they could log into their myStoria account. They can very soon have that through an app. They can either screenshot their period tracking app information or whatever information they want that's uploaded to their organized medical record and timeline. All of their information's all in one place. They can log symptoms that they're noticing either through like voice as they're driving home from an appointment. They could log just a thought. They could log a question with their doctor that they want to remember to bring up. If they're prepping for an appointment or for whatever reason they want to dig into their fertility a little bit more, they could schedule an appointment with our concierge team, which is currently in-house with Carly and her team, to look at a report and try to understand it, look at a treatment protocol and make sure that they know how to do the injection correctly, and we make sure that everything is correct there. If they have a question about a symptom and concerned about something, we would help them understand what the options are, but then direct them towards their doctor and their care team to ask for clarifying questions. There's so many different ways that someone could use the platform. And then the other piece of that is also that we've got a closed and moderated community of patients that we're trying to connect. And what we're working on doing as we build this out is connect to like situation patients that are as closely aligned together, either in stage or diagnosis or type of treatment, so that they can learn from each other and support each other and go through that. So there's lots of different facets of myStoria. The educational pieces. So for example, if they uploaded a medical record that said their thyroid was super high, we would then be like, hey, did you know we have a module? It takes you 5 minutes to go through. We have a module in understanding what the thyroid's role is in your fertility. Do you want to go through this to make sure that you're understanding it? And then you can add any concerns to your list to talk to your doctor about, or we'll prompt that as well, or they can chat again with concierge. So there's different ways that they can use the platform, but the intent is that reduce the noise of Googling, like don't go down 3 a.m. rabbit holes. We can help you understand all of your options out there, help you understand what's happening with your body so that you can communicate that with your doctor and dig into the information with them, and really kind of just proxy the burden of self-advocacy and managing their healthcare to us.
One of the features of myStoria is this personalized dashboard with my timeline, my cycle, my diagnosis. What kind of insights do you think people would get out of the tools?
I know in Canada in general, we have a fragmented health records system. So I'll say that, but park that. When it comes to fertility, and for myself, I had a clinic in Canada. I had a clinic in Waterloo, but then I went to Toronto for IVF. I had my OB that I was sent to deal with possible endometriosis. I had my naturopath. I had a Chinese herbalist that was trying to help me manage some of this stuff too. The US clinic even sent me to an immunologist. So I had all of these providers and amazing specialists that are trying to get to row in the same direction. Like I felt like I was the general contractor, just making sure everything was pulled together. The herbs I was taking was not contraindicating what the fertility doctor was saying. And I didn't remember necessarily to ask about it. So part of it is having all your information in one place really has the ability to give you a sense of freedom. You can go get a second opinion if you want. You can go to a different clinic if you want. If you feel that, you're worried about your immune system and your current clinic does something, but Markham does. Like, you can easily go get a second opinion or switch clinics. You can make sure that your records are correct and that there's not something you're missing. We're already doing the work of digging into our own care, especially when we're spending the money we're spending just trying to have a baby. We just have no tools to do that. So the intent of really that centralized system from a medical records perspective is there. But on top of that, there's a lot of amazing information that we get from our Fitbit or our Oura Ring or our period tracking apps that we're trying to look across them all. You can screenshot your period tracking app and then upload it to myStoria, and then we pull out the data and push it into all your medical records, your whole timeline and your whole system. And when you get to appointments for a lot of doctors, and I keep saying this, but with the exception of Markham, who's amazing, I felt like every appointment I got into, I'd be waiting 5 weeks to get into a meeting with my doctor to talk. And I'd spend most of the meeting repeating my health information and my health history just to try to get that personalized care. And so the intent of this as well is to help them get all of that information in one place, know what the intent of that appointment is with the doctor. And then the system itself, the platform, myStoria, will spit out a timeline, a really succinct 2 or 3 minute update with the most important information your doctor needs to know, but the ability to dig further if you want the appointment. And so why I was doing that was like trying to just feel like I was getting that personalized care, that the protocol was correct, because we know I have my autoimmune issues and we know I just had a miscarriage and we know I have uterine lining issues. And I just wanted everyone to know all the things. And so we're trying to make that work that we're already doing as patients into a more streamlined approach to engaging with your care team.
You said something really interesting there that I think it's important to highlight. Because one of the things with having so many apps on your phone is always the repetitive inputting of information. Let's say you've got your calorie tracker, your macro tracker, and then you've got like your period tracker, and then you've got something else. But you mentioned
Yeah.
that some of that information is going to be flowing and it's going to get pulled by myStoria. So is that going to be for all kind of medical records? Are there going to be ways that that information is going to flow? Because a lot of clinics and EMRs now, like the electronic medical record system, have apps. So how is that information going to flow, I guess?
It's a really good question. So we're year 2 of building this out. So we're trying to find a way to not put more work on the user's plate. Like, we've got enough going on. We're managing work, life obligations, trying to show up to appointments, and then researching, which we're already doing to like the nth degree all night long. The intent is not now this like, you've got this whole other system like an like a CRM, for example, that you have to manage and like put in the work and manage yourself. And so we've placed a lot of effort on, putting my own patient shoes on and talking to so many of our patient advisors. How do we not make that process of centralizing that information a burden to the user until we can automate the ingestion of all of that information and work alongside EHRs and whatnot? And so part of what we're doing there is our concierge team will go grab as much as they want to authorize. If they want to authorize Carly to go get their medical records, then Carly can go get the records, and then that's uploaded and then organized on their timeline. If they have an app, so they could just take a screenshot, so it's just an image, they can just send it over to myStoria, like literally upload it into myStoria and then not worry about it. And we'll like literally pull out all the relevant information and then organize it onto their dashboard. And then the other thing is that we also have what we call talk to me. They could just press like record and they could just leave an appointment. You're like, I'm worried about my follicle size. I don't know if this is correct. It looks like I had 10 follicles. Like, you could say whatever you want, or, hey, I'm noticing this weird thing. I'm on cycle day 16 and I'm noticing X. You could just talk to the app and then we'll translate that and organize that either into a symptom, a concern, or whatnot. The other thing too is, again, everything is about what they want to be centralized. And so it's up to the user to be like, I want all of my information, or I just want my fertility clinic data, or whatever. Everyone has a different approach to how they manage their journey. And the intent is not to force them into one way. And so we make it as easy as possible with as much information as possible, or it could just be like, I just want to use this as a way to talk to Carly when I need to, or I just want to use this as a symptom logger, whatever the journey looks like. So eventually we will get into the ability to automatically pull all that information. But until then, we'll do the work for the patient, or all they have to do is screenshot and upload. Hopefully by the time this podcast goes out too, we'll have most of that, some of the more of that stuff solved for. It's more difficult than you realize, and I'm realizing that as we go down the process. Like, it's a tough problem to solve for.
Oh, I mean, we get medical records, like patients who will come for second opinions, fourth opinions, and they're showing us medical records from all these different clinics. And it takes me a while to even pull out the information. I mean, how many
Yeah,
times? I mean, I'm so guilty of this all the time. Like if I'm talking to patients virtually, I'm going to be doing like this because like even the pages are in different alignment, or I'm like squinting trying to read like the
right.
handwritten records. I really hope my patients aren't screenshotting me as I'm doing it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, even something as simple as an ultrasound report, the way that the information is organized varies so much depending on where that ultrasound is done that sometimes it takes me 10 minutes to even figure out the date the ultrasound was done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also understanding what is important about the medical record. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I get medical records and it's like, oh, here it's my medical records, and I open it and it's like instructions on when to come for your egg retrieval and what antibiotics and don't have anything to drink. I'm like, that's not what I needed. I needed the dose. I needed your follicle size. I needed your estrogen level. I needed your endometrial lining. I needed your fertilization rate, but they don't understand. They think, well, my clinic sent me this. So this is obviously what you would need. So I think that's also a problem sometimes. And because we have to do the infectious disease screen, sometimes again, the medical records, they just send me all of their infectious disease screen from 2003. I was like, well, it's not really relevant that you didn't have hepatitis B in 2003 for your IVF cycle that I'm doing now. That's tough because then we have to review the record. Then we have to say it's not really relevant. It's not the information. Now they have to go back to the clinic and try to get the right information. And it just delays care and makes everything really difficult. And actually, we've been thinking about doing a post or a podcast about it. Like when you come for a second opinion, what does your fertility doctor need to know about your prior cycle? There's very key information that I really want to know. Sometimes patients would know that, and I ask them, and they know exactly what the dose was and things. Sometimes patients don't. But if we're going to get the record, let's know exactly what it is that we need.
Yeah, that is exactly it for specifically second opinions, but so many other use cases. And they're so interesting in this conversation because that's exactly kind of the enhancement of the experience on both sides that I'm trying to solve for. Because the patient, I'm sitting there being like, but I want you to know everything. And you're like, but I know I want to know everything, but there's some stuff that's literally just not relevant. And so what we're doing is like, okay, patient, upload all of the things you want to upload. We'll pull all the information out, put that into your system, organize it, and then they can go in and say, okay, I'm getting a second opinion from a fertility doctor that has a specialty in immune treatments and whatnot. And like, okay, well, we're going to pull out all the relevant information in second opinion for you. You don't have to do the work, and you can show up with that information ready for them to go and pull out the rest of the stuff that's not relevant. Because even my medical records, I have 1,000 pages worth of medical records from the years. And a lot of them are, to your point, instructions. They're like disclaimers and sign off. It was like, I didn't even realize that that was a challenge until our engineering team was like, okay, look at this handwritten treatment cycle charting. Like, what date's relevant? What date's not relevant? What units of measure are these? Is this US or is it Canada? And so all of that stuff, we're trying to just make it so that they can show up in a more calm, confident, okay, I've got this. I've got all the necessary information. I've used my time and we're waiting for a second opinion wisely, and then show the doctor. And it's so much easier for the doctor to look at that stuff and say, great, let's get into the detail right away. And let's get into a second opinion and all the information. Let's have a conversation back and forth versus that head and parsing through stuff and all of that. Cause I would show up literally with 1,000 pieces of paper and say, can I get a second opinion? How do you do that in an hour conversation? That's so hard on your side.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I know that you've had some users already on myStoria.
Yeah.
So tell me what they're saying. Tell me what you're learning from your sort of first iteration, so to speak.
Yeah. V1 went out 70 days ago. So it's been a wild ride. And as I mentioned, that we had so many users give us input earlier on. Like, I really am approaching this as like, this is for us, by us. And if anyone wants to join in and has an idea or wants to become a part of this community of myStoria, I would love that so much. There's this, just as an aside, and I'm totally going down a rabbit hole, but truly like the worst club, best members thing is like so true. I isolated myself during my journey and I wish I had not have done that. But now just the people and how amazing people are has just been amazing. So User feedback so far has been really great. The most common comment is, I wish I would have had this earlier, which obviously hurts my heart in terms of I'm sad to hear that. So many people have said I've gotten so much relief from the fact that I can talk to Carly and she can actually look at my stuff and it's a personalized conversation, or I didn't even know I had something on a document. Like I didn't even know to tell the doctor this, or I feel like my experience in chatting with my doctor is so much better. And so that just warms my heart. And really interestingly, which I'm excited about, we've had a couple conversations early on, and this has been a lot more with companies saying, look, we know family building and fertility benefits are super important, and we're seeing our employees show up to work exhausted. This is becoming more of a conversation, less of a taboo topic. Is myStoria something that I can offer my employees to help them?
That's great.
I'm so excited about that. That's been an unexpected opportunity, especially to proxy the cost. So we keep our costs as low as we humanly possibly can. We already know fertility is a burden financially. And so, yeah. So it's been amazing. I cannot wait for all the iterations we got coming out too. Like we're just V1 and we're building it out. And everything has been from the conversations we've had with our current users on what else would be helpful and what else would make your life easier and what else would make it going through this process easier for you.
So, in talking about myStoria, we've talked a lot about patients who are seeking second opinions. We've said that numerous times, patients who have these ultra complex fertility journeys, which, again, unfortunately, some do, but that's not necessarily every fertility patient's experience. What about myStoria for the person who is maybe waiting for that first appointment with a fertility clinic, or is maybe contemplating potentially doing their first IUI? How is myStoria able to help that person, or what services does myStoria offer to that patient, let's say?
That's a really good question. Initially, it was built off of my journey, which just was so complex over such a long period of time. And so we started talking to people on like some of the biggest frustrations. And a lot of that was like, how do I just use my time in between appointments and before I show up as best as possible? So even for people, I just like want to understand or know about my fertility. And so what they can do is use myStoria, create an account. Again, authorize Carly to go get all their information. Like we get all their information in there. And then we've got like a list of things. We're like, okay, typically every fertility doctor, and we've leveraged, or understanding from the medical community what you would really need. Here's a list of things that your fertility clinic is likely going to do. Like some of these tests you could do ahead of time, or you could look and you could get these tests ahead of time and get that stuff organized. In other cases, fertility doctors want to do that in-house. And so we just say, this is the test they're going to ask for. These are the things you do. Let's prep you for your appointment. Let's optimize your lifestyle factors and the things that you're doing outside of that. If you're not tracking your period, because a lot of people we talk to are not necessarily tracking their menstrual cycle or know a lot about their menstrual cycle. And so let's start tracking your menstrual cycle. Let's dig into that. Let's get as much information about your situation as we can. And then so you can show up to that appointment with testing that you've done that makes the most sense. And again, cognizant of spend and what they're doing. It's only to make the doctor's appointment easier and more efficient and use their time wisely. Again, unexpectedly is a lot of people that are like, I know I want to have a baby soon. And there's so many people saying they have fertility issues. Like, I just want to understand about my fertility. And so we found that there's a whole earlier group of people that we can help. And then there's that, okay, I know I'm having an issue. I'm waiting for my appointment. Here's all of the things I can do. So we're actually chatting as an aside. This is something I'd love your feedback on, is what are the specific things that they could do outside a clinic that don't make it harder for you, where you're like, no, we need this in the last 30 days. We don't need it 60 or 90 days ago. And so that's why the medical advisory board is so important, is we're building that process out so that you're not doing things twice. You're just making the most of the time you have and gathering the most amount of information you can.
Absolutely. So where do you see myStoria in 10 years, maybe 5 years?
We know that there's way more demand for the number of experts and specialists available to help people. There's only, I think, 37 fertility clinics, if I'm correct on that, in Canada. So there's this overwhelming number of people that are waiting, that haven't gotten into a clinic, that are trying to go through the process to get into a clinic, that are at a clinic that doesn't necessarily have a specialty in what they're doing. And so with how fragmented the fertility system is, with a lack of regulation, lack of what I'd say is like legislation around the industry. I know that's growing and that's changing. And just the nature of investment firms and private equity seeing dollar signs in this space and buying up clinics, and then that's a profit driven space. Like the patient is forced to lean in to self advocate and self navigate in their care experience. And that's not dissimilar for any complex health journey. But I just think because the fertility industry is just like, people are seeing dollar signs, and there's a human at the end of the day that's their heart is so set on trying to have a baby. And I feel so strongly that that person, like I was desperate, I was willing to spend and do whatever I could do to try to have a baby. And so for my story, my ultimate goal in 10 years is to set a standard that patient-led healthcare, or the ability for a patient to like be educated and lean into their own healthcare, is the absolute norm. And tools that are outside clinic but collaborate with what happens in clinic is well received. And a universal health record for myself is absolutely my norm. I should have all my information in one place. So we're trying to push through that resistance that I think we feel from some portions of the industry to say, I'm not an adversary in this situation. I'm really an ally. I want the best for myself, and I want to make fertility doctors' job easier. And I want tools to be able to do that. And that should be met with enthusiasm and excitement, and not, well, you're going to make our jobs harder, or you're going to cause us more issues or whatever. And so I really am trying for myStoria that we can really set that and be a forerunner and really setting that as becoming the norm. So there's that. And then the second thing is, I feel our community aspect of it, I'm really excited about, because so everyone's in the platform, they've got access to our community. We can start to connect people and say like, hey, Jess, there's 5 other people that have your diagnosis. They've got endo, PCOS, and autoimmune issue. They're in the same stage as you. Do you want to connect with them and create a very specific support circle online? And not like Oasis. I love what Oasis is doing, but do you want to just connect with each other, talk to each other? Like, what did you do? What did I do? Like, just learn from each other, and then wrap that around expert moderation, where you can have a situation where an expert comes in and says, okay, let's talk about the immune system and the impact of NK cells on fertility. And there's really specific information on that. And we can proactively pull the new research that's on it, and we can support research that's happening as well. And so I see patient-led healthcare, patient engaging with the healthcare system. I really want us to be the pioneering of that being the norm for the healthcare in general, but specifically for fertility in general as well. On the nature of part of the myStoria platform is that patients are showing up more educated. And I feel for some of the clinics that are busier, not the way that Markham, that the patient then is able to hold the clinic and the experience accountable to the right type of care for them, and the right type of getting the care that they deserve, and making the right decisions to get to baby faster, more efficiently. Or for me, just getting to the outcome that you probably can't carry a baby, and in wrapping my mind around that before I've spent $70,000 trying to. And if that's my choice, also great. I've just gone down a rabbit hole, but I don't even know if that answers the question at the end of the day on this.
Yeah, and how to put the patient at the center of it, because we say here, the patient is the hero of the story and the center of ours, which really, that's our core philosophy and our core belief. It's not just a slogan, it's just what we
Yep.
breathe every day, because like I said, this is your journey, it's not ours. And what we need to do is make sure that we meet you where you are. But for that to happen, you need to know where you are, right?
Yep.
There's
Yep. And you said something really, and is like the social determinants of health, like that whole concept, because it's so important as well to consider, or to know how to communicate it as a patient to your doctor of like, I only have $20,000 in total. What do you recommend I do? Or cultural, religious parameters that you need to consider. There's so much to that we just need to know how to communicate that properly, so the doctor has the opportunity to come to that conversation and say, okay, here's what's best. But when I say patient-led, it's the same concept, patient-centered. I 100% agree that between all of our care teams, all of our doctors, everything, like we're the center of everything. It's happening to us, and we're working with the amazing doctor to help that happen.
I think in my mind, myStoria and a fertility clinic, it really is a symbiotic relationship.
Yes. Yes.
Right? In the sense that when somebody is seeing me, there are so many things for us to talk about and to consider, right? Like, even when it's a quote unquote simple infertility still, right? We're not even down the IVF road, we're contemplating IUI. It's like, okay, let's talk about optimizing weight, Let's talk about exercise. Let's talk about supplements. Let's talk about stress and anxiety. And let's talk about IUI. And let's talk about the medication. And we'll talk about the processes. And then we're going to talk about the logistics. And we're also going to talk about cost. And then we're also going to talk about if IUI fails. And we're also going to talk about if IUI succeeds. And we have to fit that all into like, our 15, 20-minute block. All of those things are super, super important. And I would love to communicate all of that to every patient. But it's either me going to be talking rapid fire in bullet point, which nobody wants, or there has to be other ways to help communicate a lot of that information, because there is so much overlap in terms of the general guidance, in terms of general pieces. And so, again, that is why we have the podcast, because we want to be able to provide that information to patients in a way that it's information that we trust, that we believe in, that's coming from us to, again, help build that relationship, build the rapport, build the trust between the physician and the patient as well. But, not everybody wants to listen to podcasts. I mean, there's so many ways to consume information. And so having a variety of different methods to it absolutely, I think, makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's so true. I can take 6-7 minutes and I can explain the basics of IUI to a patient. But that's not necessarily the best use of our time together. It should really be about IUI specifically for you, what that means. When a patient comes to me and they said, you know what, I listened to your IUI podcast already, so I've got the basics, but tell me about the individual parts that are really relevant for me, what my chance of success is, what's my lining going to be like, what are my follicles going to look like? That's awesome. That's my favorite scenario, right? Because then we can really get into the nitty gritty of that personalized medicine aspect as opposed to just the general. The other thing I wanted to say, though, fertility patients are the absolute best patients in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
And from a physician perspective, I love working with fertility. I mean, listen, of course, I wish nobody had fertility issues and that I wasn't needed. And then I could go retire and sun at a beach with Dr. Garcia. But like, that's not happening anytime soon, unfortunately.
Wearing sunscreen, of course, and a big hat.
Oh, no, you and I, we're like in the rash guards. We're in the big hat, big sunglasses, sunscreen. Like we're those
Oh my God, I
people
love
on the
it.
beach. Yeah, we're those people on the beach. But, I have lots of physician friends who do a variety of different specialties and work with a variety of different patients. And I will stand by the fact that I think fertility patients are the absolute best. And I say that because you will never meet, in general, a group of more motivated, more driven, more incredible, resilient individuals ever.
Yeah.
Right? Like we joke, if you tell a fertility patient to jump, they're going to ask you how high they're going to do it, right? They are so motivated. So there's so much satisfaction that also comes from that, because when we talk to patients about quitting smoking, about taking vitamins, about taking supplements, about exercise, like our patients are actually doing these things. And so we're making really big improvements, fertility health, but also just general health, because fertility health and general health are very intimately linked. And it's so satisfying on our end to be able to see the progress and to be able to see these things happening, right? And so there's absolutely a huge appetite for information and a huge appetite for thinking about all the things outside of the nitty-gritty egg and sperm smushing together, however we're doing it. I'm really glad to see that there is a ability to kind of provide that information to patients in another way, to get information that is actually factually accurate as well. Because unfortunately now there's so much disinformation out there, especially on social media. And that is very concerning. And that's really worrisome, because you're talking about patients who are extremely motivated to do all the things, to the point where maybe they may do things that maybe not the best idea for them because it worked for somebody else on the internet or on social media, right? Because like it is a vulnerable population, to be honest. It's true. I mean, I always think back to the fact, the first IVF baby was born in 1978. This is still a very new area of medicine. The fact that there have been so many babies born by IVF blows my mind all the time. And so there are still a lot of unknowns, and there's so much gray area. I would say black and white is like 1%. The gray space, that gray area is 99%. And that's where the challenges are. And that's where it's so hard to bring forth information and to provide information about that, the gray, in a way that it's truly nuanced, in a way that truly expresses the fact that maybe this is good for maybe some people, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
That is, I think, one of the really, really big challenges when it comes to expressing information. And that's where, frankly, I think it's impossible to do in a 60-second reel on Instagram.
Yeah, I love all of this because that symbiotic relationship between clinic and myStoria is what I set out to do. Everything else is hurting the patient. If you approach it any other way, you're hurting the patient at the end of the day in their experience. And so on that content piece of it, there is so much out there and we don't know. And often on the patient side of things, it's like that's exactly the conversation of I just want to know, even if it's controversial, like I just want to understand it so that in my head I can say, I know it's controversial, but I still want to try it and talk to my doctor about it. Or I know it's controversial and with the price and my situation, maybe it doesn't make sense for me or whatever. I want to be able to understand that information to your point, impossible to do in like a 60-second reel. And that's why even with myStoria is like, everything so important to be medically backed, fact checked, all of that stuff, which I appreciate both of you so much when we went through that like 100-page document that I had initially done. And now what we're trying to do now that we got that core on is you have the expertise, you have the content. Can we take a patient on the platform and say, hey, based on your situation, your appointment you're about to have, and your diagnosis, there's an amazing podcast or there's an amazing blog by Dr. Garcia and Dr. Wise on this particular topic. Like, here's the link, go see it. I love Megan Doyle, the genetic counselor.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
wonderful.
We love her too, yeah.
I bring her up at everything. I just love her. And then we said to her, like, we're not trying to go recreate the wheel and that expertise and that information. Can we just elevate your expertise? Can we just match that with the person that wants to understand that? And the same thing on this side. A, I love you guys. You guys are just so awesome. And B, I appreciate everything. And C, like we're so aligned on that piece of it. It's not even like the clinic's operating system. Like you've got your CRM, you've got your EHR, all of that stuff. It's not about it disrupting any of that. It's just like the in-between time on that is what we're trying to solve for on the patient side so that when you do show up, it's better for all sides.
Well, I'm excited to see where myStoria is going.
Thank
And
you.
I know this has been your vision from the beginning, and you've said that from day one. I want to help. It's, by us, for us. Yeah, I know that you're going to do it. I'm
Appreciate it.
rooting for you and for myStoria and all the patients that will benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be on the podcast. Thank you for giving me the time, the platform, and the conversation. It's been wonderful.
Well, we absolutely love having you and we love the insights, and you've hit the nail on the head. And it's, a relatively small nail because it really is that balancing act, right? Of trying to get the right information into the right hands without creating that burden for patients. And I love the fact that you repeated that multiple times. So you don't want to create that burden. You don't want to create that burden because that is absolutely true. That is the last thing that anybody needs, especially when they're going through fertility, right? In the modern world. I wish you all the best and all continued success. And I'm so excited to see where this goes.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast or visit us online at myconfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episode.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Wise.
Music by Mixkit. Life is a Dream by Michael Ramirez C.
My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice. nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.